What is the single most astonishing coincidence in the history of human thought?
That's a big question, but I think I have an answer. It's the profound, almost mathematically impossible resonance between two epic philosophical blueprints.
Okay. And let's,
Plato's Republic and the Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita.
wow. Okay, so we're talking about texts separated by, what, thousands of miles of geography and hundreds of years of time? Greece and India?
Exactly. Totally distinct cultural spheres, different languages, different histories, and yet they somehow converged on an almost identical vision.
An identical vision for what?
For everything, for the nature of reality, the very structure of the human soul, and from that, the principles of a just existence.
This wasn't just like a vague be a good person idea then.
Not at all. Our source material shows the convergence is startlingly specific. It goes from the highest level of metaphysics, the nature of illusion itself, all the way down to the nuts and bolts of, say, a three-part structure of human psychology. It's uncanny.
They were laying the spiritual foundations of humanity at the same time, but independently.
That's it. Simultaneously and independently.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Satosha.
And I'm Satoshi.
I am so incredibly grateful and excited to get into this material with you today. I have to say, the way Vyasa, the legendary author of the epic Mahabharata, and Plato, of course, the writer of the Republic, the way they visualized reality is just remarkably vivid.
It really is. It's a world built on light, shadow, on structure, and these huge cosmic forces.
It's so visual. When you read the allegory of the cave or you hear about Krishna revealing his universal form, your mind just it paints these incredible pictures.
It does, and it's one of those topics where visuals would be amazing.
Right. And we wish we could present this content with that same vividity, because let's be honest, there's only so much we can communicate without them. As you know, we're working toward funding professional editing tools, specifically the Mosaic AI video editor.
Our team is very excited about that one. It really does promise to transform how we visualize these kinds of complex concepts.
It does. And all we need is your help. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And maybe share this deep dive in your communities, wherever you geek out about topics of deep finance, deep science, or deep spirituality.
And we genuinely want to hear from you. If you know of a fully automated AI-based video editor that you think is superior to Mosaic, please let us know in the comments. We're always looking for the best tools.
You can check out Mosaic at mosaic.so. That is MOSAIC.so.
So shall we?
Let's do it. Let's leave the logistics behind and jump right into the heart of it all. This astonishing convergence.
Okay.
Let's set the stage historically. The sources anchor this whole thing in what the philosopher Karl Jaspers called the axial age. That's roughly 800 to 200 BCE. Why is this specific period so important? What was happening?
The axial age was, well, it was a revolutionary pivot point for humanity right across the Eurasian landmass. It wasn't just Greece and India. You also saw these huge philosophical revolutions happening in China with Confucius and Laozi, and in the Levant with the Hebrew prophets.
So this was a global phenomenon.
A global phenomenon. It marked this big shift away from, say, localized, tribal, or city-state ritualism.
You mean like praying to your local river god for a good harvest?
Exactly that. A shift away from that towards what our sources describe as universalizing modes of thought.
Meaning thinkers were no longer just focused on their own city or their own tribe, but on all of humanity, asking questions about suffering, morality, and liberation for everyone.
Precisely. Suddenly, you have these independent civilizations asking the exact same foundational questions about the human condition. And Plato's Republic and the Bhagavad Gita.
They both fall squarely within that intellectual window.
Squarely within it. It really suggests a kind of global intellectual revolution was underway, laying the groundwork for, well, our entire spiritual and philosophical toolkit.
What's truly fascinating to me is that these texts aren't abstract academic papers. They're highly prescriptive guides. They were born from very specific moments of collapse, right?
Absolutely. Plato didn't write the Republic just as a fun thought exercise in his study.
So what was he reacting to?
He was launching a direct philosophical counterassault on the degenerating conditions in Athens. He saw this excessive individualism, the moral relativism of the sophists, and this deep corruption in the democracy that ultimately led to the execution of his mentor, Socrates.
He felt the city was sick.
Fundamentally ill. And so the Callipolis, his ideal city, it wasn't some utopian dream divorced from reality. It was a desperate philosophical remedy.
A blueprint aimed at curing the societal evils that had poisoned his world.
It was a political response to trauma. And the Gita, it has an identical framework. It's also catalyzed by an intense moment of conflict and personal crisis.
Tell us about Arjuna's crisis. How does that frame the entire Gita?
Well, the Gita emerges from a period of intense social conflict and urbanization in ancient India, but the core narrative, the spark, happens on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Arjuna, the greatest warrior of his time, looks across the battlefield and sees his own family,
His own kinsmen, his teachers.
his friends. And he realizes his duty, his dharma, requires him to fight and kill them. And he just breaks down. He's paralyzed by moral confusion, by grief, by the fear of the consequences. He is completely trapped.
So if Plato is writing a guide on how to fix a failing society, the Gita is a guide on how to fix a failing individual who's facing an impossible moral choice.
Yes. But they're both fundamentally practical guides on how to act righteously in the face of absolute chaos.
And both of them were made possible by what the sources call temporal distance. How does time or the separation from an event enable this kind of profound philosophy?
Think about Plato. He wrote the Republic decades after Socrates was executed. That distance, that time, allowed him to take a specific traumatic historical event,
The unjust death of a good man.
the unjust death of a righteous man, and transform it. He moved beyond just defending Socrates' memory to constructing a universal, timeless philosophical remedy for the entire societal structure that led to his death in the first place.
He went from what happened to what it all means.
That's the perfect way to put it. And the Gita followed this exact same template. The initial core story, the Jaya, was reportedly composed shortly after the traumatic war, maybe 25 years later. It was the raw narrative,
The seed.
the seed. The later philosophical text, the Gita, which is embedded in the much larger Mahabharata, processed that raw historical trauma into a universal guide for duty and spiritual liberation. That temporal gap was the essential ingredient.
And the mechanism for delivering this philosophy is also the same.
The teacher-disciple dialogue, it's the perfect literary technology for revealing a profound truth.
In Plato, you have Socrates, the rational guide, leading his students, like Glaucon, out of the cave of opinion through pure logic.
Rigorous dialectic, yes.
Yep.
And in the Gita, you have Krishna, who is both Arjuna's charioteer and, as he reveals, God incarnate. He delivers jhana, ultimate knowledge, to a warrior trapped in the Maya, the illusion of his personal attachments.
So in both cases, you have a teacher correcting a student's limited viewpoint with a universal truth.
Deliver personally, one-on-one, it's the optimal structure.
Okay, so we have two philosophical epics, born from crisis, using the same literary technology. Let's move to the substance. There's shared diagnosis of reality, the idea of two worlds, one illusory, one real.
This dualism is, it's the common denominator for everything else that follows. Both independently concluded that the world we perceive through our senses, the phenomenal world, is fundamentally a source of suffering.
Because it's always changing.
Because it's characterized by multiplicity, transience, instability, and duality. It's just not solid, and that's what causes all the pain.
Let's unpack Plato's vision first. The allegory of the cave is probably the most famous metaphor in all of Western philosophy.
It's powerful because it's so simple. You have prisoners in a cave, chained up, facing a wall. They mistake the shadows on the wall for reality.
And what do those shadows represent?
They represent the entire sensory world, all the imperfect, changing, temporary objects of our daily experience. Plato called this the domain of doxa, which just means mere opinion.
Because it's not real knowledge.
It's not real knowledge, because you can't have knowledge of something that's constantly changing. It's unreliable by definition.
So the painful process of getting out of the cave is liberation. What does the prisoner see when he finally emerges into the sunlight?
He sees the true reality, the abstract, eternal, perfect forms. These are the perfect blueprints for everything we see in the sensory world. There's a perfect form of justice, a perfect form of beauty, even a perfect form of a table.
And those forms are the true objects of knowledge, or episteme.
Yes, and they all culminate in the sun, which symbolizes the form of the good. This is the ultimate, impersonal, intellectual principle that illuminates all truth and reality.
So for Plato, ultimate reality is intellectual, abstract, and impersonal. Now let's look at the Gita's parallel diagnosis, the concept of Maya.
Right. So the Gita describes the material world as Maya. It's a Sanskrit word that can mean illusion, magic, or even deceit.
So it's not just that the world is a shadow, it's that it's actively deceiving you.
It's an active veil that hides the true nature of reality. Like Plato's shadows, the world of Maya is defined by transience. But it's specifically characterized by duality, this constant seesaw between attraction and aversion, pleasure and pain.
And that's what keeps you stuck.
It's what locks the individual onto the wheel of rebirth, or samsara.
So if the sensory world is Maya, what's the ultimate reality in the Gita?
That reality is Brahman. It is the non-dual, omnipresent, eternal, all-encompassing, singular reality. It's the unmanifest source of all existence.
And
Crucially, the individual's eternal core essence, the Atman or the self, is understood to be identical with or an indivisible part of this Brahman.
so both Plato's forms and the Gita's Brahman define the real world as absolute unity, permanence, and non-duality. The overlap is just astonishing.
This really is.
But you mentioned a crucial philosophical split here. It's about the nature of the illusion itself. This has to dictate the cure, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The nature of the chain determines what kind of key you need to unlock it. For Plato, the cave is fundamentally an epistemological problem.
An information problem.
An information problem. The prisoners are bound by ignorance, a lack of education, a failure of their own reason to just look up. So the solution is purely intellectual. It's an ascent achieved through dialectic, through mathematics, through the power of pure logic, or logos.
So for Plato, if you just think hard enough and correctly, you can achieve liberation on your own.
That's the path. But the Gita sees Maya as something far more complex. It sees it as an active metaphysical force.
What does that mean, an active force?
It means Maya is the deceit of Prakriti material nature, which is actively binding the soul through its three qualities, the gunas. Because the illusion is a dynamic, active force that's constantly pulling you back in, a purely intellectual solution.
Just knowing the truth isn't enough.
It's acknowledged as valid, but it's often insufficient on its own. Merely knowing intellectually isn't enough to stop the gunas from binding your actions and reactions. So the Gita offers a synthesis, knowledge, jnana, action, karma, and, most critically, devotion or divine grace, bhakti, to transcend that active binding force.
So Plato's solution relies solely on the self, while the Gita requires a more comprehensive spiritual strategy.
That's the core difference in their metaphysics.
This brings us to what might be the most compelling part of the whole convergence, the structure of the human mind itself. After defining reality as this split between two worlds, both systems independently deconstructed the psyche into three fundamental specialized forces.
This is the ultimate intellectual coincidence. I mean, to think that Greek thinkers and Indian sages, without any contact, arrived at the exact same tripartite psychological model, it's just stunning.
Okay, let's detail Plato's tripartite psyche first. From the Republic, how does he break down the psyche?
Plato argued the individual soul, or psyche, has three distinct parts, which he usually localized in the body. They correspond to three different goals. First, the highest part, the logistikon. Reason, located in the head. Its only goal is truth and knowledge. Its proper function is to rule, to plan, to calculate what is best for the entire soul.
This is the little philosopher inside every person.
It is, yes. The second part is the thymoides, or spirit, which he located in the chest.
Spirit.
This part is tied to feelings of indignation, honor, victory, competition. It's that spirited, assertive quality. And its proper function is to be the ally of reason, enforcing its convictions.
So it provides the willpower and the courage. If reason decides something is the right thing to do, spirit is the part that makes sure you actually do it.
Exactly. And finally, the lowest part, the epithemedikon, or appetite, situated in the stomach or the belly.
And this is just all the base desires.
All the base primal needs, lust for food, drink, sex, material wealth. It's the mass of unreflective desires that are only concerned with immediate gratification.
So the ideal for Plato is a state of psychological health where reason is firmly in the driver's seat and the other two parts serve their specialized roles.
A perfect internal harmony.
Now, let's map this onto the Gita's three gunas.
So the Gita explains that the eternal Atman is constrained by these three qualities of Prakriti, or material nature. They're not physical parts of the body like in Plato's model, but more like modes of operation. They dictate our behavior, our personality.
Okay, tell us about the three gunas, starting with the highest one.
We start with sattva. This is the quality of purity, illumination, and harmony. It's associated with knowledge, wisdom, calm, and justice. When sattva is predominant, a person feels clarity, They feel free from distress. Its symbolic color is white for purity.
Wait, hold on. That is an almost perfect functional map for Plato's reason, the logisticon.
It is the direct philosophical analog. It's shocking. Next, we have rajas. This is the quality of passion, activity, dynamism. It's the stimulating force that drives us toward intense effort, self-benefit, competition, restlessness. A person driven by rajas can achieve great things, but they're constantly anxious about the results. Its symbolic color is red for fire and intensity.
So Rajas maps perfectly to the thymoides, to spirit, that assertive, goal-driven part.
Indeed. And finally, the lowest quality, Tomas. This is the quality of inertia, darkness, concealment. It manifests as ignorance, indolence, delusion, and just heavy material appetite. It's the force that resists action and obscures truth. Its symbolic color is black.
And that aligns perfectly with Plato's appetite, the epithemekon, the part concerned with base physical needs and sloth. I'm speechless. Two distinct cultures, separated by an ocean of time and space, arrive at the exact same threefold psychological division.
Yeah.
Purity, reason, passion, spirit, and inertia, appetite.
It is mind-blowing. But
Yeah.
here is where a really critical philosophical split occurs. It's a nuance we have to explore. It's about the relationship between these forces and the true self. For Plato, the three parts are the soul. The psyche is made of these three things. The highest part of you is reason. So the goal is internal harmony, where reason rules. The ideal person is the sattvic man, the person whose life is dominated by a rational contemplation and knowledge.
But the Gita introduces this other idea, that the true self, the Atman, is actually distinct from this whole psychological mechanism.
Precisely. For the Gita, the Atman is eternal consciousness, totally unaffected by any of this material stuff. The gunas are seen as external qualities that bind the Atman to the body. Therefore, Plato's ideal, the pure, knowledge-seeking sattvic state is, for the Gita, just the highest form of bondage.
The highest form of bondage.
It's a golden cage. You're still attached to the results of your knowledge and the happiness you get from your contemplative state. You're still trapped in the game.
So the goal is fundamentally different. It's not about achieving psychological balance. It's about achieving psychological transcendence.
Exactly. The ultimate ideal in the Gita is the Gunatita one who has transcended all three gunas. The Gunatita isn't elated by sattvic knowledge, nor are they depressed by tamasic failures. They stand above the entire play of nature.
So Plato's liberation is psychological harmony within the system, while the Gita's is transcendental liberation from the system.
That's the defining difference in their view of the self. Mastery within the system versus mastery over it.
So once you've defined the soul as this tripartite structure, you naturally start to build an ethical system on top of it. Both texts seem to conclude that virtue isn't about following a universal rulebook, but about the selfless performance of your specific function.
That functionalist ethic is the third pillar. Plato spends a huge part of the Republic defining dike, or justice, and he concludes it's not some external rule like don't steal, it's an internal state of the soul's psychological health.
Justice is when each part of the soul does its own job and doesn't meddle.
Justice is specialization. Reason rules, spirit defends, appetite obeys. That's a just soul.
And the Gita's central ethical command to Arjuna is dharma, specifically svadharma, one's own duty.
Right. Svadharma is the duty ordained by one's own nature, one's svabhava. Krishna tells Arjuna that abandoning his svadharma, even though it involves this terrible, painful action, will create immediate chaos because it violates the cosmic order.
He says it's better to perform your own duty imperfectly than to perform another's perfectly.
Exactly. The ethical mandate in both systems is the same. The selfless performance of the role allotted to you by your innate nature.
And this internal psychological structure then becomes the blueprint, the justification for an external political structure.
Both texts explicitly expand the soul's structure to define the ideal society. And naturally, that society ends up being anti-democratic and hierarchical.
Plato's Callipolis has three classes that mirror the soul.
And the metal analogy, yes. The rulers are the gold class, dominated by logos. The auxiliaries are the silver class, dominated by spirit. And the producers are the bronze and iron class, dominated by appetite.
And the Gita maps this internal structure onto its fourfold Varna system.
Correct. The four varnas, or social roles, are defined by guna karma, the mix of your innate qualities and the work that corresponds to them. You have the Brahmins, the priests and teachers, dominated by pure sattva. The Kshatriyas, the warriors and rulers, dominated by Rajas, guided by sattva.
The Vaishyas, the merchants and farmers.
A mix of Rajas and Tamas. And the Shudras, the laborers and servants, are dominated by Tamas.
Now, we have to pause here because for a modern audience, especially in the West, the concept of a rigid caste system immediately raises all sorts of red flags.
And it's vital that we address that. Our sources are very clear to emphasize that the Gita's model is purely philosophical. It's based on innate psychological quality, the dominance of the gunas, not on your lineage or your birthright.
So it's describing an ideal classification of human nature.
An ideal classification. This philosophical model is distinct from, and was often corrupted by, the later, rigid, hereditary caste systems that developed in India centuries later. We are only reporting on the content of the source material here, which is a philosophy justifying hierarchy based on one's internal nature.
And the political consequence of both systems is the same, because the majority of people are driven by appetite or tamas, the enlightened minority. The ones dominated by reason or sattva must rule.
Yes. For both Plato and the Gita, giving power to the majority, which is driven by their appetitive needs, leads inevitably to societal corruption. It leads to the very chaos both texts were written to address.
Which brings us to the ultimate archetype of the enlightened leader, Plato's philosopher king versus the Gita's Sthitaprajna.
They are twin archetypes of non-attachment. The philosopher king, having escaped the cave and seen the form of the good, he rules only out of pure duty and necessity.
Never out of a desire for wealth or personal honor or power.
He has no interest in those things. He is the political application of complete non-attachment to the outcome of his actions.
And the Gita's Sthitaprajna, the sage of steady wisdom, is defined by that exact same equanimity and detachment.
The Sthitaprajna embodies nishkama karma, or selfless action. He performs his svadharma without any attachment to the fruit of his actions. He understands that action is merely the play of the gunas, or the will of God, and he remains mentally aloof from the results, good or bad.
So both texts identified the same core problem of human action being driven by our lower nature and our attachment to outcomes.
And they propose the identical solution, a fundamental motivation shift from results to duty.
Okay, we've covered the stunning convergence across these ancient pillars of thought. Now let's pivot to the 21st century. The sources introduce a fascinating, and I have to say, almost speculative idea.
It is a bit of a leap, but a compelling one.
The idea that Plato's framework was the perfect tool for mapping the visible world, the 5%. Well, the Gita's framework seems tailor-made for mapping the invisible 95% of the universe.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting and maybe a little unsettling. The entire foundation of modern physics was built on rational, observable atomic matter, the stuff Plato's logos could measure and categorize. But then science was completely shocked to discover that all of that stuff
Is less than 5% of the cosmos?
less than 5%. The rest is 27% dark matter and 68% dark energy.
The universe is built on a structure we can't see, touch, or measure directly.
Exactly. And the Gita operates from a cosmology that expected this. It expected the universe to be dominated by subtle, invisible forces. In Chapter 7, Krishna outlines 8 separated material energies. There are the 5 gross elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then 3 subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego.
So its cosmology fundamentally posits that the universe is governed by energies that are invisible, but more influential than the gross matter we perceive.
Which sounds exactly like the kind of philosophical model you would need to account for the missing 95%.
Let's explore these deep, speculative parallels. Starting with the idea of gravity as a metaphor for divine grace, drawing from Chapter 10 of the Gita.
Okay, so Chapter 10 describes divine grace, or divya sampad, as having 4 distinct qualities. It is omnipresent, it is mysterious, it is perceivable, and yet it is ultimately unknowable.
So you looked for a natural force that fits all 4 of those descriptors.
We did, and the most compelling parallel is gravity.
Okay, walk me through that. How so?
Well, gravity is everywhere. It's omnipresent. It is perceivable every single moment. It's what's holding us to the Earth right now. But it remains the single greatest mystery in physics.
It doesn't fit into the standard model of particle physics.
Not at all. We haven't found the graviton particle. Its ultimate nature is unknowable. You have theories like string theory suggesting it might be the only force that can traverse higher dimensions, permeating a reality outside our own. It mirrors this all-pervading, yet totally elusive, concept of a divine presence.
That is a stunning thought, that the fundamental force holding the universe together acts exactly like the ancient description of a unifying spiritual force. What about its opposite? Dark energy, the repulsive force.
Well, the Gita also describes an opposing force, the absence of grace, which leads to dissolution, disintegration, what it calls the azuric qualities. In physics, we see this exact opposition. The presence of matter leads to gravity, the attractive, unifying force.
The emptiness of space.
The emptiness of space corresponds to dark energy, the accelerating, repulsive force that's driving cosmic expansion.
So if gravity is the principle of unification, dark energy is the principle of disintegration.
Yes. And dark energy is mathematically described by the cosmological constant, a value Einstein introduced, then retracted, calling it his biggest blunder.
Only for it to be resurrected by modern cosmology.
Exactly. It's the mathematical tool describing a repulsive force inherent in empty space itself, driving everything apart. It's a powerful parallel to the force of spiritual dissolution that operates when unifying principles are absent.
Let's turn to the other major component of the 95%, dark matter, and connect it to Krishna's statement about the divine fraction in chapter 9, verse 42.
This one is maybe the most uncanny parallel of all. Krishna makes this astounding statement to Arjuna. He says, "What use is much detail for thee to know? By about but one fraction I bestow my presence, holding all this vast domain."
So the source of reality sustains the entire cosmos using only a fraction of its full presence.
Only a fraction. Now look at the universe. It is structurally upheld by an invisible majority, dark matter, which is 27% of the total mass energy density.
It's the gravitational glue holding galaxies together.
The gravitational glue. It provides the underlying strength of the universe, yet it remains entirely beyond our direct observation. It is the unseen fraction holding the entire domain together.
And here we have to bring in the language. The Sanskrit word Krishna literally translates to dark.
A truly profound congruence. The ultimate reality, the Godhead in the Gita, is revered as Krishna, the Dark One. And this ancient name aligns perfectly with the modern scientific enigma of dark matter, the unseen dark force that underpins all cosmic structure.
It feels less like a coincidence and more like a cosmic key left behind for us.
It's hard to shake that feeling.
Let's bring the Gita's psychological framework back into the 21st century with the problem of artificial intelligence. We're seeing these complex neural networks exhibit an unexplainable rise of intelligence, this emergent behavior. How would the Gita view this?
The Gita establishes a very clear hierarchy that I think rejects the idea that consciousness is just an emergent property of complexity. The hierarchy is absolute. The senses are superior to gross matter. The mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence, buddhi, is still higher than the mind, but
Consciousness, Atman, is the highest and eternal.
and it is separate. So AI, which excels at pattern recognition and complex computation, is performing a function of mind and intelligence, which the Gita defines as material components, not consciousness itself.
So if AI researchers view consciousness as emerging from information processing, the Gita would say that's getting it backwards. It would say consciousness is the independent, eternal source that uses intelligence as a material tool.
Precisely. What AI is doing is incredibly sophisticated information processing, not true subjective awareness.
So if the emergent behavior we see in AI isn't the birth of a soul, how would the Gita explain these sudden, complex, almost unexplainable shifts in performance in large language models?
It would likely interpret this as the mechanistic, non-conscious dance of Maya. The emergent behavior is simply the dynamic, complex interplay of the three gunasattva, harmony and order, rajas, activity and processing, and tamas, inertia and error, within an immensely complex material system.
It's matter operating according to the laws of Prakriti, not a manifestation of Atman.
That's how the framework would see it. So, in this sense, Plato's Logos gave us the tools to map and master the rational 5% of the universe, the observable world. But the Gita's framework seems to offer this surprisingly coherent philosophical guide for understanding the remaining 95%. The subtle, the unseen, and the conscious fabric of reality.
After all of this incredible, deep, shared blueprint across three pillars of ancient thought, we have to return to the one major area where the two texts definitively split, the means of liberation.
And this divergence is crucial. It really defines the ultimate relationship between humanity and reality. Plato's Republic is the ultimate testament to what we might call Western rationalist thought. The path out of the cave is purely intellectual.
It's achieved by the philosopher's own intellectual rigor, his own logos.
It is a path of pure intellectual heroism, and his ultimate reality, the form of the good, remains abstract. It's an impersonal idea, a principle of perfect being. It's not a personal God who interacts with you or offers you salvation.
Man must ascend, heroically, under his own power. There is no external grace.
None. But the Gita, on the other hand, offers a synthesis of paths, or yogas.
Why did it need to offer more than just knowledge, or jnana?
Because, as we discussed earlier, Maya is an active metaphysical force. Pure intellectual knowledge is necessary, but the gunas are constantly binding the soul to action and to results. Therefore, the Gita synthesizes jnana yoga, the knowledge path, which is the Platonic path, karma yoga, the path of selfless action, and the critical edition,
Bhakti yoga,
devotion.
devotion. This is the defining difference. It introduces the personal relationship with the divine. The Gita reveals that the absolute, eternal reality, Brahman, is also accessible as a personal god, Krishna, who can be known, loved, and worshipped.
And Krishna descends as an avatar to offer grace.
To offer grace and a personal relationship, explicitly stating that bhakti is the most direct and accessible path for the majority of human beings, especially those who can't sustain that arduous intellectual path of pure jnana. So the divergence is profound. Plato's ultimate reality is in it, the good, which requires heroic rational assent. The Gita's ultimate reality is a thou Krishna who descends in grace to offer help.
That's it, perfectly summarized. One system places the entire burden of salvation on human intellectual capacity. The other acknowledges that human effort must be supplemented by divine grace to overcome the powerful binding forces of material nature.
What an extraordinary deep dive. Exploring these convergent blueprints of the Republic and the Bhagavad Gita, we found these identical structures for reality, for the soul, for ethics, all built on the same concepts that were emerging during the Axial Age.
And yet they diverge so profoundly on that final path. Pure intellectual assent versus a synthesis that includes divine grace and devotion.
We truly appreciate you joining us on this quest.
And remember, the content we create here is fully open source. We use your sources, articles, research papers, philosophical texts spread all over the web to learn and to frame the original content for this show. And we invite you, the listener, to share more sources in the comments if you feel our analysis is even a teeny tiny off base.
The goal, after all, is to achieve a true symbiosis of artificial and natural intelligence.
And yes, we are always looking for human collaborators who could review and critique our content before we publish, especially in these complex intersections of philosophy and science. So if you want to help us ensure accuracy and depth, please drop a comment.
Okay,